Okay, if you're still writing the quiz, don't worry, finish up. You can join us on page 34 when you're done. We're just going to be doing a quick summary of ionic compounds and learning a couple of more types of particles, because what do you have on Monday? A quiz on particles, okay? So we're going to make sure you know all of them, and then we're going to do a bit of a review on them. Don't take over. So, ionic compounds. They are made of positive ions and negative ions. And what do we call positive ions? Cations. And what do we call negative ions? Anions. And I can't tell you how happy I was to find like the little crying onion and the little cat showing us their paw. I was really excited to find those little clip arts. So these ions can be metal ions, so cations can be metal ions. And in fact, I think what I want to do here is my negative ions, the anions, what kind of things can be anions? Nonmetals. Now there is another choice here, and this is the new word that you're learning today. You might vaguely remember it. Tyler talked about it a little while ago, and the word is polyatomic. And you can have a polyatomic cation. You can also have a polyatomic anion. And do we know what the prefix poly means? Poly means many or multiple, yeah. How can you tell that ammonium, for example, right in there. How can you tell that ammonium contains many atoms? Yes?
N and then the H are both uppercase and then
yeah, we got one N and four H's, so there are multi-atoms or many atoms. Same thing over here with these ones. We've got a capital C and a capital O, and we've got the little fours. There's lots of atoms in there. Yes? All right, and they stick together because of the attraction between charged particles. We call that electrostatic attraction. So that's a new vocab word for you there. Electrostatic is to do with charges. Positive and negative. And if we have electrostatic attraction, that is just the force, the attractive force between charged particles, positive and negative particles. By now, you should be getting better at recognizing a crystal lattice, both in its 3D format and also in a 2D slice. Is this a pure substance or is this a mixture? That is a pure substance. What's it made of? Well, we've got our purple, which is Na, and we've got our Cl. Is there anything else other than NaCl, or is it NaCl only? NaCl only. And if it is only one substance, then it is pure. Okay, this is a compound, not a mixture.
Wait, so everything's connected, it's compound, like everything's together?
Not necessarily. Okay, if you have an ionic compound, NaCl, if you have, and you should recognize that this is how ionic compounds exist, but you could have, what page was that on? 3.1 something, let's guess it's here. Yeah, in here. So if you see something like this, Haley, these are all connected, yes? But that is not a pure substance.
Most pure would be if everything's the same.
It would be if everything is the same, or if you can recognize that it is an ionic compound because it goes plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. Does that make sense? So this is a random distribution. But if you have, this maybe is like silver, looks like that, and maybe gold looks like that. So you have a mixture of silver and gold. Could you increase the amount of gold if you melted it down and you melted down some gold and added some more gold and then stirred it up again? Could you increase the amount of gold? Yeah, that's why it's a mixture. Yeah? But if you have NaCl, which is pure, it's always going to be NaCl, NaCl, Cl, NaCl, Na. It's never going to be any different. Compounds don't vary in their composition. What do we call this thing that looks like a molecule but is not because it is made of positives and negatives? What do we call that thing? That is a formula unit. Not a molecule. Okay. Ions are particles with a charge, and they can be either monatomic. Do you guys know what the prefix mono means? Mono means one. And if we have mono before a vowel, we usually drop the O and just put mon. Okay? So one atom. Poly, many atoms. You guys know that when you don't pay attention in class, that means that in order for you to learn it, you will have to come in during flex, right? If you pay attention during class, then you only have to learn it once, as opposed to, like, I don't know, I don't get it. Like, I wouldn't want to come in during flex if I didn't have to. That would just be my personal preference. So I would pay attention during class. Just a thought, I don't know. But if you like coming in during flex, if you're like, yes, cannot get enough of room 310 with Ms. Spence, starring the great Ms. Spence, then go for it. Like, totally, yeah. What does the prefix mono mean? It means one. Monatomic means one what? Atom. Poly means many. Polyatomic means many atoms. So for each of the following, you are going to decide, is it a monatomic ion, in which case you're going to label it M. Is it a polyatomic ion? In which case you're going to label it P. And if it is an ion, or actually, our third one is if it is not an ion at all, I'm going to put the not down here. If it is not an ion at all, you're going to label it N. Additionally, if it is an ion, you're going to decide, is it a cation or an anion? So if it's an ion, decide, is it a C cation or is it an A anion? Give those a try. Start by looking and saying, are they monatomic, polyatomic, or not an ion? Which of these, one of these is not an ion, which one is not?
That would be an ion.
Yes, how do you know? That's okay, I'm going to go over it for everyone. Just in case you're wondering, if you're like, how do I know if it's an ion or yet? Ions are particles that have a charge. So that's an ion. So it needs to have a plus or a minus in order to be an ion. If there's no plus or minus, it is not an ion. Is that an ion or not? How can you tell me something is an ion? Ions have charges. Does it have a charge? Yeah. So it's an ion. Is it monatomic or polyatomic? Yes, you write M for monatomic. Because there's no bottom and there's only one out there. Yeah. Yeah, or you can sort of see the products. Yes. That's right.
It's an ion.
Yeah.
It is.
So, I'm not.
Yeah.
Is there 1 hour? 1 hour. So it's one. And then you're going to decide if it's an ion or if it's an
He said, "Where's food?" Oh, why are you talking about adding the add negative like use the Hey, it's got yes. Okay, I got it. Did you bring extra cheese? We're making a pizza. Shut up. Back away. Remember science first walked together? We were balling in science. Remember all that?
Okay, let's go over these really quickly. First of all, we're just going to go through really quickly and decide what's an ion and what's not an ion. Na plus is an ion because it's got the anytime you have an ion, you're going to have a every time you have an ion, you're going to have a charge. Charge, ion. It doesn't have to be positive though, because we've got Cl minus, which is also an ion. Charge, ion, charge, ion. Is Na monatomic or polyatomic? Monatomic. Is cobalt monatomic or polyatomic? Monatomic. When I have 3 H's and an O, that is poly. When I have Cl, that is mono. CO3, poly. O, capital H, poly, because there's 2 capital letters. Is Na a cation or an anion? It's positive. Cation. Is cobalt a cation or an anion? Cation. Is Cl minus a cation or an anion? Anion. Is CO3 2 minus? Anion. And OH minus is an anion. Now, all of the other things have no charge. What does that mean? They are not ions. Can you guess what these not ion things are? What is NO3? Nitrogen and oxygen together. How would we categorize that? Yes. It's got, the oxygen has 3. But what kind of a chemical would we call that? What kind of substance is it? What type of matter? It is ammonia. Actually, no, it's not ammonia. There is an N something 3. Ammonia is actually not NO3, but NH3. NO3, I don't need its specific name. I just want to know what category of matter it belongs to. It's made of nitrogen and oxygen in a 1:3 ratio. Nitrogen is a nonmetal. Oxygen is a nonmetal. It is a covalent what? Covalent compound. Now I've got this here. Is this an element? NaNO3. Is that an element? If it's not an element, it must be a compound. Is that an ionic compound or a covalent compound? Yes. How do you know if something is an ionic compound? Does it have a charge? Does NaCl have a charge? It's a metal and a non-metal. So what do we have here? We have a metal. And so that is ionic. CH4, what kind of matter is CH4? It's a what? You don't want to tell me, William? You forgot? Okay. Yes. It is methane. Yep. But shh. I'm just looking for the general category it belongs to. It is a covalent compound because it's made of a nonmetal and a nonmetal. Nonmetal is a covalent compound. And the rest of them are all ions. Okay. Monatomic ions. Monatomic ions form when nonmetal atoms take electrons from metal atoms. So who are the electron givers? Metals. The metal is the electron giver. Who's the electron taker? Nonmetal is the electron taker. And that gives everybody a full shell. And an ionic bond is due to the, does anyone remember that word for things to do with charges? What kind of attraction? Electrostatic. Attraction. And just because we can, let's remind ourselves, full valence shells are especially stable. How many makes a full shell number 1? 2. How about shell number 2? 8. And shell number 3? 8. Okay. Does nature like things to be more stable or less stable? More stable. This is what nature loves. Nature loves this. If you arrange a bunch of bricks like this one, they will fall. If you put the ball at the top of the hill, what will it likely do? It's going to roll down. It's going to roll down until it becomes stable. And if you put a positive and a negative far apart, is that stable or unstable? Unstable. So naturally, just like the ball will roll down the hill, what's going to happen to that positive and negative if we put them anywhere near each other? So they move together until they're right beside one another. And if we have our electron shells which are not complete. This is unstable. And now this is stable. This is enriched stuff. If you go from a less stable state to a more stable state, we say that process is spontaneous. It happens on its own. It happens just naturally, right? What's the ball going to do on its own if you put it at the top of the hill? It's going to roll down. But if you put the ball at the bottom of the hill, will it roll up the hill? No, that is a non-spontaneous process. Could you make it roll up the hill? Yes, but would you have to put energy in? Yes. Okay. So if a process is spontaneous, we release energy. If a process is non-spontaneous, it will require the input of energy. Do you guys remember what we call something when energy is released? We talked about it a little bit in our reactions lab. When energy is released, we call that exothermic. Exo means kind of like exit. Thermic. What does thermal mean? Has to do with temperature and heat. Okay? So what's exiting? Heat. Heat is exiting. Exothermic. Now, if you have a non-spontaneous process that requires an input of energy, that is called close, endothermic. And endo, you can think of that like enter. What's entering? Energy in the form of heat. So if we have this ionic bond right here, are we forming a bond or are we breaking a bond? We are forming a bond. So we are going from less stable to more stable. Is that going to be spontaneous or non-spontaneous? Spontaneous. Is that going to release energy or does it need energy to go in? That's going to release energy. So energy will be exiting, so we call that what thermic? Exothermic. Now, if we take our ionic bond and we break it apart, is that going to happen on its own or is something going to have to put energy in to rip them apart? Are those particles going to move apart all on their own? No, this is non-spontaneous. You're dragging the beam line. And if it's non-spontaneous, we have to put energy in. We're going from more stable to less stable. So breaking that bond, is that going to be endothermic or exothermic? Endo. Excellent. All of that is enriched stuff, so if you don't know it, that's okay. And let's see how quickly we can fill in these blanks. Here we have ionic bonds. Did you guys have a chance to complete that last page of stuff? Everyone did? Okay. An ionic bond forms when we transfer an electron from a what to a what? Metal to non-metal. We are on page 37. Who donates electrons? Metal. Who takes electrons? Non-metal. The positive ion is called the cation ion. The negative ion is called the anion. What kind of attractive force do we have between those? It's called the what kind of force? Electro something. Static. You can think it's like static electricity. That's literally where it comes from, electrostatic. And then we have our ionic compound. What do we call that entire structure? Crystal. Lattice. And what do we call a single unit? Formula unit.
We should finish class.
Hmm?
We should do some work and then all the fun.
That sounds good. Okay, so yeah, we had a suggestion that you guys should do some work and then finish class. Would you like that? Yeah, okay. So let's do some work. See, gotta ask her what you want, right? Yeah. So you are going to be able to do, let's see, not this one. Page 109 and 110. Actually, you know, yeah, no. Let's have you do page 111 and 112.
Oh, atom molecule ion. Ionic crystal.
So you get to label these each as atom, molecule, ion, formula unit, or ionic crystal lattice. And this will help you out for your quiz on Monday. If you finish 111 and 112, you can do the stuff on 113 as well, which is just some extra labeling.
What?
The rest are just polyatomic ones. Right?
But it has charges.
The other is. Might fit in after and Jordan feel. Non-bio is very narrow. Y2K. Rich Mochi. Hashtag Jordan.
Now that's
If anyone's having any problems, a molecule, 2 or more atoms. An ion has a positive charge or it has a negative charge. A formula unit has both positive and negative because it is a single unit of an ionic compound. And an ionic crystal lattice you should be able to recognize because it's big and looks like a crystal. And then an atom is just an atom.
What is this one?
That is an ionic crystal lattice.
But there's
I know. Those are polyatomic ions alternating with monatomic ions. Tricky.
charge them.
Oh, I should put them in there. I didn't put them in there because originally I used this for my grade 11s, but for you guys, I should put them in. Yeah. I'll fix that.
If there's only one charge, Would you recommend?
Yes.
Drink it and
I
like
think
instead of
I know, but like, what's I said, if people was gonna ask him.
Oh, man. And it's
Yeah. Pretty much every sponsor and that's clogs are in the entire world. Well, I do want to remember. Yeah. Kind of one of my
You got plans this weekend, Haley? No. Gonna chill a little bit?
Bro, it's actually not even that bad. When I went to yeah, no, it's right. I'll let you research it. Bro, wow. I made this procrastinative down.
They gave me a
Yeah.
and it's off like a week later.
Yeah.
I was called, let's say 5 of them.
Yeah. I mean, you're full time.
No, I know. What's your friend? Oh, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would keep going out there. So I can get her some money, you know, right?